Hello folks, and welcome back to another video. We begin on September 21st, 2023, and I am located alongside CSX's Columbus subdivision at the Route 161 railroad crossing in Worthington, Ohio. After taking a brief break for a couple weeks, I came out to the tracks with no specific goals in mind, and I was willing to catch whatever was in the area at the time, which in this case was a southbound empty coal train. After waiting for about 10 to 15 minutes, the southbound empty coal train that I was waiting on swiftly makes its way through Worthington. I unfortunately didn't get the symbol for this train, and even though there really isn't that much to see here, the engineer was pretty friendly, giving me a shave and a haircut as he passed. After catching that empty coal train go down the Columbus subdivision, I then moved several days later onto September 26th, 2023, and I am located at Buckeye Yard in Hilliard, Ohio. On this day, I saw off of heritageunits.com that CSX 1827, the Baltimore and Ohio Heritage Unit, was in town today. Considering that I failed to catch it the previous day, I decided to come back for take number 2. As soon as I got here, 1827 was already in the process of building its train, which is symboled Y103 at this time, but would later become I-147. After a couple more moves going back and forth, Y103's locomotives backed past the bridge, and I was able to get a clean shot of the Heritage Unit. Also, it is important to mention, from where I'm standing, this was as close as I was legally allowed to get to the train. A few minutes later, 1827 and the accompanying ES40DC behind it were cut off from the train so they can grab another cut of the train to put it all together for the trip to North Baltimore tonight. Despite being subjected to controversy amongst the rail fanning community, I think in some cases the fade design CSX has decided to use for their heritage units actually works in certain cases. After finally catching a CSX Heritage Unit, I then moved to the next day on September 27th, 2023, and I am located at the Wilson Bridge Road Railroad crossing in Worthington, Ohio, next to Norfolk Southern Sandusky District and CSX's Burt Line. On this day after class, I saw off of heritageunits.com that NS 4001, aka Sonic the Hedgehog, was leading a southbound mixed freight train down the Sandusky District today. Since I always wanted to see this unit after it got its wreck repair several years ago, it was a no-brainer that I went out with the intentions of catching it. had to wait about 10 minutes before a triangle of headlights showed up in the distance, which ended up belonging to 4001. I unfortunately didn't get the symbol of the train 4001 was taking today, but I have reason to believe it's NS-171, the daily Conway, Pennsylvania to Chattanooga, Tennessee mixed freight train, with an all AC 44 C6M consist today. After catching NS-4001, I returned to the same location about a week later on October 1st, 2023. On this day, I was watching the virtual railfan camera up in Fostoria and noticed a recently reactivated SD70M-2 was one of the locomotives assigned to take NS-28N today. With that knowledge in mind, I set out with the hopes of catching it. The first train of the afternoon didn't take very long to show up, which was Norfolk Southern southbound mixed freight train 171, on a daily journey between Conway, Pennsylvania and Chattanooga, Tennessee. After checking the Railstream camera up in Delaware, I noticed NS-28N was not too far behind 171. Judging by the time in the afternoon, the sun was not on the right side of the tracks for me to adequately get good pictures, so I moved a couple railroad crossings down to Schrock Road in hopes of catching 28N there. Almost an hour behind 171, the train of the afternoon was next in line, which was Norfolk Southern southbound intermodal train 28N on another daily journey between Chicago, Illinois and Charlotte, North Carolina, with NS SD70M-2 2767 trailing third today. One more southbound would grace the Sandusky district before I left for the day. It was another southbound intermodal train which I unfortunately did not get the symbol of, but I have reason to believe it's either 271 or 266. After catching those 3 Norfolk Southern trains, I then moved several days later onto October 3rd, 2023, and I am located just outside the Central Ohio Model Railroad Club in Worthington, Ohio. On this day, I was here for the weekly operating session. During a midpoint of the operating session, one of the other club members mentioned a CSX train was not too far away from our front doorstep. With the train only being less than a minute away, I walked up to the tracks to end up catching a southbound CSX loaded coal train going down the Burt line. After watching that loaded coal train go down the Burt line, I then moved several days later onto October 8th, 2023, and I find myself back at Schrock Road in Worthington, Ohio, just up the road from the Central Ohio Model Railroad Club. On this day, I really didn't have any specific goals in mind. I just went out to the Sandusky district, and the Columbus subdivision as well, on this day in hopes of seeing something cool. over to the Sandusky district, I would end up witnessing a perfect meet between a northbound intermodal train and a southbound mixed freight train. I unfortunately didn't get the symbols for either of these trains, but the stack train is likely a very early 277, while the mixed freight train is either 18W, 18M, or 118. If any of you guys do know, a comment down below would be graciously appreciated. With a pair of SD-70 Aces in charge of this one, the final train I would see on this afternoon before I called it was another Norfolk Southern southbound mixed freight train. I didn't get the symbol for this train either, but I would find out after the fact that this was Norfolk Southern 179, the daily Bellevue, Ohio to Irondale, Alabama mixed freight train. After catching some more Norfolk Southern trains, I then moved several days later onto October 9th, 2023, and I find myself back at the Route 161 railroad crossing in Worthington, Ohio, next to CSX's Columbus subdivision. On this day, I was looking to catch a break from the Norfolk Southern trains and was hoping to catch a CSX train, and my break didn't come until I watched a southbound empty coal train pass the virtual railfan camera up in Fostoria. With the sunlight fading rapidly, I only had to wait about 10 to 15 minutes before I watched the signal turn green and our southbound empty coal train thunder his way through Worthington. Our empty coal train in question is likely CSX E502, an as-needed job that comes out of the Toledo docks back for the mines in Russell, Kentucky for another load. After catching that CSX empty coal train, I then returned to the same location a couple days later on October 11th, 2023. On this day, I was reading through the comments on the live chat for the virtual railfan webcam up in Fostoria and noticed someone mentioning a CSX W011 would be taking the Columbus subdivision today. If you spent any amount of time railfanning on CSX, you would know that a W prefix on a train symbol would usually mean that it's a work train, and on this day, it was actually a loaded rail train. Considering the opportunity that was being presented to me, I went out with the hopes of catching it. After about an hour of waiting and moving across the street from the farmer's market that I was originally at, W011 slowly makes his way through Worthington on his way to Parsons Yard in Columbus, with a classic pair of EMD SD40-2s on point. After catching the work train, I returned to the same location once more a couple weeks later on October 26, 2023. On this day, after a couple visits to the Norfolk Southern Sandusky district not going well, I came out to the Columbus subdivision with hopes of seeing any trains that would happen to be running today, which in this case was a southbound loaded coke train. After waiting for about 45 minutes, a triangle of headlights approached from the north which belonged to our coke train, which in this case was CSX B410, an as-needed job that comes out of Gibson, Indiana off the Indiana Harbor Belt for Newport News, Virginia. After catching that CSX loaded coke train, we then moved several days later onto October 31st, 2023, aka Halloween, and I find myself at McCord Park in Worthington, Ohio, alongside Norfolk Southern Sandusky District and CSX's BERT line. On this day, I was watching the virtual railfan webcam up in Fostoria and watched Norfolk Southern 28N pass the rail park up there, with one of Norfolk Southern's recently acquired AC 4400 CWs trailing second. While most of the quote-unquote new AC 4400 CWs are wearing the former paint scheme from CEFX Leasing, this one in particular is unique, for wearing the paint scheme of the old Central Maine and Quebec Railway, a fallen flag which is now a subsidiary to Canadian Pacific. Even though I've been taking a break from Norfolk Southern for the past couple of weeks, this opportunity in particular was one I just couldn't say no to. When I got over to the park, I looked down the tracks and noticed one of the automatic signals was green, meaning that a northbound was not too far away. The first train of this cold afternoon was a Norfolk Southern northbound intermodal train that I unfortunately didn't get the symbol of, but I have reason to believe it's either 267 or 271, both trains originating out of Rickenbacker Yard in Columbus, Ohio, with the 267 going to Hammond, Indiana, and the 271 going to Chicago. If anyone knows what this train was, a comment down below would be graciously appreciated. A little while later, another Norfolk Southern northbound intermodal train would grace the Sandusky district. I actually was able to get the symbol of this train just by looking at it, which in this case was a very early NS-277, a daily job that comes out of Norfolk, Virginia to Chicago, Illinois, with a brand new 4700 series AC-44C6M leading solo at the head end. Now, the reason I was able to tell that this train was 277 was actually its mid-train DPU configuration, with one of the locomotives given the classic shrill whine of an EMD 710 prime mover being pushed to its absolute limit. Not even 10 minutes after the passage of 277, the train of the day would soon make its way south next, which was NS-28N, a high-priority intermodal train that comes out of Chicago, Illinois, for Charlotte, North Carolina, sporting NS AC 4400 CW 3987, wearing the eye-catching colors of blue and gray from the Central Maine and Quebec Railway. Later that day, I would make my way down to the Central Ohio Model Railroad Club to participate in the weekly operating session. On my way back, I ended up crossing the CSX Columbus subdivision at the Route 161 railroad crossing and noticed some headlights of a northbound train quickly approaching. I normally don't like catching trains at night because there really isn't that much light to see the train in general, but considering how well lighted the area around me was where I pulled off to catch the train, I was willing to give it a try. As it would turn out, the lights would be just enough for me to see CSX L456 as he speeds his way out of Columbus on his way for Walbridge, with one GE and a short train behind it. After L456 disappeared into the darkness, I then made my way home, which is where we now conclude yet another video. Even though I was able to get a decent variety from both CSX and Norfolk Southern, this video definitely comes to show that I'm at the mercy of the railroad whenever I go out watching trains. No matter the case, if you enjoyed this video, consider checking out some other ones of mine. Leave a like or a comment down below to share your thoughts, subscribe if you're new, and tap the notifications bell if you want to be notified when a new video gets posted here on the channel. Till next time, this is All Ohio Rail Fan, signing off.